Hello friends, first of all welcome of all of you in this video lecture series of economics 12th standard. Before starting this lecture, I just revised what we studied in previous video lectures. In previous video lecture, we discussed the important concept of topic number 3rd B, that is elasticity of demand. What is meant by elasticity of demand? Types of elasticity of demand. So the next content is factors affecting elasticity of demand or determinants of elasticity of demand. So the first determinant is nature of commodity. First determinant is nature of commodity. Commodities are broadly divided into two groups. Commodities by nature can be classified or divided into two groups: necessity or necessary goods and luxurious goods. Necessary goods and luxurious goods. Demand for necessary goods like food grains, medicines, textbooks, etc. is relatively inelastic. Is relatively inelastic. So in this case, when the elasticity is relatively inelastic, the demand curve is steeper curve. Demand curve is steeper curve, and in case of comfort and luxurious goods like cars, perfumes, furnitures, etc., demand is relatively elastic. Demand is relatively elastic. So in such case, demand curve is flatter. Demand curve is demand curve is flatter curve. Demand curve is flatter curve. The next determinant or next factor which influence elasticity of demand is availability of substitutes. The degree or of availability of close substitutes. The demand for commodities is more elastic than the commodities that has a large number of substitutes. The demand for commodities is more elastic because elasticity is high, because when there is a rise in its price, consumer easily switch over to the other substitute in big way. For example, in case of tea, a close substitute of tea is coffee. So if rise in the price of tea, consumer can switch over to other substitute of tea, that is coffee. So elasticity is high. Demand for commodity will be more elastic if its close substitutes are available in the market. For example, lemon juice, sugarcane juice, etc. But commodities having no close substitute like salt, demand will be inelastic. Demand will be inelastic. But in case of if there is close substitute like tea and coffee, lemon juice and sugarcane juice, demand will be more elastic. Next, number of uses. Number of uses. If commodity can be used to satisfy several wants at a time, it will be elastic demand. It will be elastic demand. Or the commodities, it have elastic demand. If a commodity has limited uses, it will be have inelastic demand. It will be have inelastic demand. Or if, in other words, if single use goods have a less elastic demand and multi-used goods have more elastic demand. For example, coal and electricity. Coal and electricity have multi-purpose uses, or these both commodities are used to satisfy different wants. Next factor or determinant which influence elasticity of demand, that is habits. If a consumer has become habitual for particular, if a consumer is habitual for particular commodity, its demand is inelastic. Habit makes demand for certain goods relatively inelastic. For example, addicted goods like drugs, liquor, cigarette, that is relatively inelastic demand. Next, durability. In case of durable goods that are purchased once but which is used for more, which is used for number of years, so elasticity of demand is low. But for perishable goods like agricultural goods, fisheries, agricultural goods, vegetables, elasticity of demand is high. Elasticity of demand is high. So, in other words, demand for durable goods is relatively elastic. For example, furniture, washing machine, and demand for perishable goods is inelastic. For example, milk, vegetable. Next, complementary goods. The demand for a commodity which is used in conjunction with other commodities to satisfy a single wants, means if demand made for one commodity brings a demand for other commodities simultaneously, known as a complementary goods, to satisfy a single want is relatively inelastic. For example, a fall in the price of mobile handset many may lead to rise in demand for SIM card. Or in our second example is car and petrol. Next, determinant or factor which influence elasticity of demand, that is income of the consumer. Elasticity of demand is less in case of consumer having either a very high income or very low income. The demand of middle income consumer is more elastic. In other words, demand for goods is usually inelastic if the consumer has high income. Usually inelastic if consumer has high income. The demand pattern of a very rich and extremely poor person is rarely affected by significant changes in the price. Next, urgency of want. If a commodity is urgently required, its demand will be inelastic. That is relatively inelastic. But if a need for commodity is not urgent, its demand will be elastic. In other words, goods which are urgently needed will have a relatively inelastic demand. For example, luxury goods, medicines, and in case of luxury goods which are less urgent have relatively elastic demand. Luxury goods which are less urgent having relatively elastic demand. Next, time period. Elasticity of demand is always related to period of time. It varies with the length of the time period. Generally speaking, longer the duration of period, greater will be the elasticity of demand and vice versa. So this is because a consumer can change the consumption habits in the long run in favor of cheaper substitute of the commodities, that is time period. Elasticity of demand depends upon time period. Elasticity of demand for goods is more in the long run than the short run, that is time period. Okay, this is only a theoretical explanation of the factors which determine elasticity of demand or factors which influence elasticity of demand. But your kind information, all these things, that is all these determinants are important as far as exam is concerned, because practical approach question is asked. Practical approach question is asked on this determinants. Means example is given. For example, demand for salt, inelastic. Demand for the commodity having urgent need, demand will be inelastic. Next, if commodity have substitutes, demand will be more elastic. And if commodity don't have close substitute, demand will be inelastic. अशा पद्धतीचे प्रश्न एक्झाम्पल्स विचारले जातात की कमोडिटी आयडेंटिफाय करायची आहे आणि त्यानंतर त्याच्यावरती डिमांड इनइलास्टिक आहे, इनइलास्टिक आहे, रिलेटिव्हली इलास्टिक आहे, रिलेटिव्हली इनइलास्टिक आहे, स्टिपर कर्व आहे, फ्लॅटर कर्व आहे, अशा पद्धतीचे क्वेश्चन्स विचारले जातात एक्झाममध्ये. प्रॅक्टिकल अप्रोच क्वेश्चन. दॅट्स वाय ऑल द डायग्राम्स विच आय taught you in previous videos must keep in mind, and while hearing this lecture you draw the diagram suitable to the each and every determinant. You can draw a diagram which each and every determinant with proper explanation of each and every determinant in detail. You draw a diagram simultaneously, you can draw a right example and factors which determine that particular or suitable to the particular diagram. That's why you have to draw a diagram. If urgency, if substitutes, if number of uses, level of price and change in price, proportion of expenditure, customer habits, लेवल ऑफ इन्कम, ड्युरेबिलिटी, या प्रत्येकाच्या एक डायग्रॅम्स तयार होतील. रिलेटिव्हली इनइलास्टिक ड्युरेबल गुड्स असतील तर त्याला कोणती डायग्रॅम ॲप्लिकेबल होईल, नेसेसरी गुड्स असतील तर कोणती डायग्रॅम ॲप्लिकेबल होईल, अर्जन्सी गुड्स असतील तर त्यासाठी कोणती डायग्राम ॲप्लिकेबल होईल, सबस्टिट्यूट गुड्स असतील तर त्यासाठी कोणत्या डायग्राम ॲप्लिकेबल होतील, या सर्वांची इन्फॉर्मेशन डायग्रॅम आणि त्याचे एक्झाम्पल अशा पद्धतीने तुम्हाला लिहायचं, डायग्रॅम त्याच्या प्रॉपर ड्रॉ करायचे. आणि हे करत असताना मुख्यत्वे करून नेसेसिटी गुड्स, नेचर ऑफ कमॉडिटीची डायग्रॅम, ड्युरेबिलिटीची डायग्रॅम, लेवल ऑफ इन्कमची डायग्रॅम, हॅबिटची डायग्रॅम, सबस्टिट्यूट गुड्सची डायग्रॅम आणि कॉम्प्लिमेंटरी गुड्सची डायग्रॅम फार महत्त्वाच्या आहेत. त्या डायग्रॅम ड्रॉ करण्याचा प्रयत्न करा आणि डायग्रॅम ड्रॉ करून ॲनालिसिस किंवा एक्सप्लेनेशन लक्षात ठेवण्याचा प्रयत्न करा. ओके.